So I get to dive into the edge rusher, and last week I dove into wide receiver, which I feel like had a lot of question marks, and now I get edge rusher, which has even more question marks because we have two like potential superstar talents that just can't stay on the field in Jalen Phillips and Bradley Chubb. So the first question is automatically like, what do you do with those guys? Can you rely on them? Do you rely on them, or do you look to go out and fill the spot, opposite Chop with another young talent in the first few rounds? I think a lot of what we do in the draft is going to depend on what those compensatory picks actually look like. I know we're expecting a third and a fourth, but crazy things happen sometimes, and it doesn't work out that way. I will say, and Josh, you could probably shed some light on this. The one site said Bradley Chubb's out was in 2025. I don't know if that means this offseason or next offseason. So is that next offseason?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Now
so
we can. There are tons of levers that we could pull to, like, should the team decide to keep him.
Yeah.
For the longevity of whatever's left on his contract, there are a ton of levers we could pull as a team to free up a crap ton of cap space. But again, that means he's on the team.
Yeah, my concern there with Chubb is just what even is he at this point? I mean, he tore every ligament there is to tear in your knee, and now he's trying to come back, and it's like he went a full year and a half now because it was December of the previous year. So by the time the next season comes around, it'll be nearly 2 years removed from the injury. So we'll see what happens there. We'll see what happens. So Scotty in the chat says that we can cut him post June.
As a June 1st post cut, yeah.
A post June 1st cut, and we would be solid. Yeah. So I wouldn't be surprised. Sorry,
correct me if I'm wrong. We can't touch that money until post June 1st, though.
Right. Correct. And that's the downside.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they're GMs. They have ways to do this. I mean, salary cap gurus all over the place nowadays. Yeah. So we'll see what we do with Chubb. We'll see if we decide to keep him. I think, to the point in the chat here is that we offer a pay cut or a restructure, see if he wants to stick around, try to rebuild his career. Jalen Phillips is immensely talented, but his body hates him, it appears, because he just can't stay on the field. I mean, the guy had, six tackles and a sack. He played just 4 games last year. Pressured the quarterback twice, tackle for a loss, 2 pass deflections, 2 hits on the quarterback. Like, he only played 4 games. He made so much, he was so disruptive in just 4 games. I would love to see him get a full season, but I don't know that that's something we can rely on now. So when I look at our edge rushers, I see one guy. I see Chop Robinson. He came in last year. We were all we had question marks popping over our heads like they do like in cartoons and stuff. We're like, I have no idea what to think about this guy. First half of the season was super slow. Second half of the season, he came on strong. And, there was NFL stats popping up every time he was on the field with, like, he's leading the league in pressures since week 10 or whatever it is. So Chop finished the season strong. Other than that, though, we don't have anybody. Emmanuel Ogbah, who was our other most productive edge rusher, he is a unrestricted free agent. Quentin Bell had a okay depth-like season. He's a restricted free agent. And then we have Mo Camara, who couldn't get on the field, Cameron Good, who's a special teamer, and Tyus Bowser, who I personally thought was very good. And then I looked at his stats. He was very bad. So he probably won't be back. Sorry, Tyus. You weren't as good as I thought you were. So here's what I did, guys. To kind of determine where we kind of stack up in terms of our edge rushers with the rest of the league, I did the same thing I did with the wide receivers, and I looked at the playoff teams. These are the best of the best. Let's see what they're doing. It was interesting to me to see that a lot of the teams don't have traditional edge rushers. There's a lot of teams that have 4 defensive linemen. That's how they put them on the depth chart. They don't differentiate between defensive tackle and defensive end. They just have 4 D linemen. Then there was teams like the Washington Commanders who play a 4-3, but they're outside linebackers where they're pass rushers still, which you would traditionally see in a 3-4, but we actually saw that from them in the opposite. So I thought that was interesting. Other things that stood out to me, and this is a really painful one, is that Andrew Van Ginkel's an absolute freaking stud, and we let him go for nothing. Minnesota Vikings were first in pressures on the quarterback, first in tackles for a loss, first in quarterback hurries. They were second in sacks. So the Vikings were pretty good. The second half of that Vikings thing, because I looked at the top 2 productive edge rushers from each playoff team. and the two for Minnesota were Greenard and Van Ginkel. So it would be amazing if we could have had the foresight to sign Van Ginkel, but we put our faith in Jalen Phillips.
God,
which
I loved him. I
Yeah,
really
so did I.
did.
He really stole my heart during Hard Knocks too, because it just saw like the struggle like the lower tier guys have, and Van Ginkel like every day was just checking the news to see if anybody was making any rumors about him potentially getting a long-term deal. And every time he got called in the office, he would light up and be like, "Oh, maybe this is it. Maybe I got my deal." And he didn't get it from us, but he got it from Minnesota, and he's flourishing. So good for him, man. I would get a Van Ginkel jersey no matter what the colors are.
Oh, for sure. But how many sacks did he have? Like 12?
In total, they had 23.5. Let me see if I can see how many he had.
Sorry, I'll look it up. Keep going. Sorry.
Yeah, Van Ginkel had 11.5 sacks. Yeah.
Yeah, fucking wild. Good for him. And 2 pick sixes, I think.
Yep, and played 81% of snaps.
Wow.
Actually, Minnesota's edge rushers played way more snaps than any other team in the playoffs. Like their 81% for both of their edge rushers was crazy. The second closest was Washington, and that they had 74%. So their edge rushers played 7% more than any other team. So it's not all bad though, because when comparing top 2 edge rushers, what I found is that we were in the mix with a lot of the statistics you would look at from edge rushers. So we were nearly top 10 in pressures on the quarterback. We were at 11. Same with tackles for a loss. We sat at 11, right? Quarterback hurries, we were in the top 10. We were at 7. And even QB knockdowns, we were at 10, which I don't know how the hell you measure that statistic, but okay, I'll take a top 10 stat anytime, right?
Oh, yeah.
Where we struggled was sacks, of course. Since I only looked at 15 teams, we were 15 out of the 15 teams that I looked at, but that we could have potentially been a lot lower in terms of the whole season stat thing. And the one that I really caught my eye was missed tackle percentage. 14th out of the 15 teams I looked at, and we missed our 2 edge rushers missed 11.8% of their tackles, and our boy Chop was the bigger what do you call it? The bigger number there. 16% of his tackles were missed for Chop, and we saw that in the beginning of the year. We would talk about it on the show often about how, hey, Chop, just reach your arm out or wrap him up, or come on, bud. He ended up getting it towards the back half of the year. So
hell yeah, he's a stud.
He's an absolute stud. So why do I say all this stuff, right? Why am I throwing out all these stats? It's to say that our edge rushers were actually playoff, like they are comparable to the playoff teams this year in terms of top 2 edge rushers from each of those teams. So what do I want to see? I want to see us bring in another guy. I don't care if it's through free agency. I don't care if it's through the draft. If we get the extra 3rd round pick, I would love to see one of those 3rd rounders spent on an edge rusher. But I know we do have a lot of needs. So I really wouldn't be opposed to bringing in somebody else. I thought Emmanuel Agba, his numbers were really comparable to other guys filling a similar role as he was, where he was an edge rusher / like big boy run defender. He was pretty good, which is what you want from a depth guy. If we wanted to bring him back for depth, I wouldn't be opposed to that. Really, though, we just need the guy opposite Chop, and we need the defensive tackles. We need this offensive line as a whole to put pressure on the quarterback, because our traditional linebackers aren't used in that capacity, really. Yeah. So we need to get to the quarterback from the edge. Chop showed a lot of promise. I hope he keeps up with it. But there's nobody else on this roster that we can depend on to actually perform this role. So I want to see get these trenches stacked up, boys. That's what we need, right? I mean, it's enough of the Ferrari style of play, as Josh likes to say, and we need to add a little diesel into our engine here.
We need a lifted truck on like 38s.
Yeah, I'm hoping Bradley Chubb comes back and he, I don't expect him to be the player that he was before his injury, because he was, I don't know if you guys remember, like he was a true game changer prior to that injury. He was
9 sacks or something like that, right?
Yeah, he was balling out, man. He was playing the best football of his career at that point. I don't think we can expect that. And Jalen Phillips, I'm just hoping he stays healthy, man. I feel bad for the kid. It's getting to the point where it's just, I just want to see him stay on the field.
Let me ask you guys a question. If you could trade in some of Jalen Phillips's steady production when he's on the field, right? A couple less sacks a year, a couple less solo tackles, that kind of stuff, for him to actually be on the field for the whole season. I mean, that's a fair trade in my opinion, right?
I mean, considering the turnstile we had at edge rusher this year, I mean, like our most snaps was Agba. He played 69%, and
Depressing.
then it was Chop at 53, and then nobody else even hit 25.
That's wild.
So, like, it was just an absolute turnstile at the position.
I'd take that trade off too because we had Chop on the other side.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting thing. And when you talk about Anthony Weaver's defense, he coming from Baltimore. And I think we talked about this a few weeks ago when we were talking about grades for the defense. Like how is Anthony Weaver's defense going to evolve? Like, is it going to be more Baltimore centric? Is it going to be his own thing? Because you look at the way Baltimore builds their edge rushers, they don't really pay their edge rushers, or at least they haven't in the last decade. It feels like they usually go through and draft them and then just let them go into free agency.
Yeah, their edge rushers were Kyle Van Noy and Odafe Owe this year, so they just get production out of whoever's available on the free agent market.
It's because they know how to draft.
And Scotty here in the chat going, we had low sack stats because our secondary played so soft. I kind of wonder, not to like fully push back on edge rusher being a need, but kind of calling back to what I said about the running back position last week, to where my argument was like running back's still a need, but it's more so depth and getting the interior offensive line fixed before anything.
Yeah,
so I was just going to say, I guess what I'm saying is like, is the need at edge rusher more so like, yeah, we need some more edge rusher depth. Definitely love to get somebody opposite of Chop if Jalen's not the answer, if Chubb's not the answer. But is it more so on, yeah, we got to figure out this secondary before anything else?
No, because I'm a trenches guy. I'm an inside-out guy.
Me too.
I think,
Yeah.
I think that it's just been proven time and time again that that's just how it works. You very rarely get a team that builds from the outside in and is successful that way. Do I think we need another superstar? Do I think we need to trade for Myles Garrett? No, I don't think that's what we need to do. I think
on a team-friendly deal. No, I'm kidding.
Listen,
if we just get everybody on a team-friendly deal, we'll win the Super Bowl.
How hard is this shit, Chris Greer? Come on, man.
Yeah.
The reality is we need depth everywhere. I think I do not envy Chris Greer this year, and I know that he put us in this position, so it's kind of his fault. He dug his own grave here. But like, truly, there's no depth. I mean, we're looking at young guys who, and this is just the life of being a GM. You take a bunch of young guys that you hope can produce, right? I mean, we saw the LA Rams do it. They just got production out of all their young guys in the defensive line. Whereas Mo Kamara didn't do anything. Cameron Good is perpetually on special teams. Quentin Bell came on a little bit towards the end of the year, but was it enough to rely on him to be like a rotational starter? Probably not. So like, it's not. It's always that kind of chicken and egg situation with GMs and players. Like, how much is it the GM and how much is it the player? And I think eventually the players have to do their work too.
Mm-hmm.